Here is our Faux Bamboo Credenza. It is all done. It is made of maple. It has classic faux bamboo details, and it is actually a very easy cabinet to build. The back of this cabinet is actually screwed on. Because we paint cabinets, we have to be able to remove our backs easily. The interior of this cabinet just has a basic adjustable shelf, but it has very simple rabbet and dado construction. Very easy to replicate this cabinet in many different styles. The door hinges are all going to be bloom soft closes. The magnets are a beautiful simple magnet catch. Now the model for this cabinet is what we'll look at next. The model again it's very basic. I added a couple of the bamboo elements. I didn't add a ton of it because it's not necessary, but here we'll remove the base panel. You can kind of see the dado in the end panel. You can see after I remove the top here, you'll see the dados and the rabbets on the top as well. Again, just a super basic cabinet, very high margin cabinet. I'm going to dry fit this cabinet here. You can see the end panels going on, the base panel, and I've got the mid panel set there. You can see in my little video here, I had to do a little bit of surgery on this base panel to get my end panel to fit on correctly. It just didn't quite want to go on. So we did some cutting on with our little jam saw and got the end panels to fit on the cabinet better. And you can see here I'm attaching the top runner. There's two runners on this cabinet, and again we had to notch those out. You can see that in my model here. The top had to be notched out to fit correctly on the end panels. Now this is the basic structure of the cabinet. You know, two end panels, a base panel, a couple of runners, and then a mid panel is essentially the carcass. And then of course a back is going to be the structure that kind of holds everything together. Now check on my dimensions and make sure that I'm good. And the cabinet looks fantastic. We'll go ahead and check it for square as well. Not that it really matters at this point, but we do want to make sure our dimensions look good. So now that I know my cabinet goes together well, the joints fit, the dimensions are good, I'm going to go ahead and start gluing this thing up. And I'm always preaching, like, dry fit your cabinets. Like, take the time, no matter how much time it takes. Dry fit everything and make sure it all goes together, because when you're putting a cabinet together with glue, you don't want to have, you know, a holy shit moment. So anyway, get the glue on here, and you'll see that I've got my squaring blocks out, and I'm going to put these end panels on and use my squaring blocks, because squaring blocks it's like having an extra set of hands around. It really aids in production. And if you're a company that has labor, you know, the more things you can do yourself, obviously the better. You know, let other people do their job, you do your job. And a squaring block is a great way to just like I said, have an extra set of hands. Make some glue ups and assembly very easily. Here I had to recut that mid panel. I think I'd take up maybe 1/16 or an 1/8 off the front. The whole face of this cabinet should be flush, because we're going to put faux bamboo on the front of it here in a minute. So anyway, glue all this up. I'm putting glue up here. Get these runners put on here, and I've already marked on my runner where my mid panel needs to go, so that it's easy to get that mid panel lined up right where I want it. Set these things in here. Again, everything goes together nice and smooth because we pre-fit our cabinet, which is again super important. Like, pre-fit your cabinet. How many people I've had to beat over the head because they just immediately want to glue their cabinet up. So put all our bar clamps on here, and I use just all these. I love Bessie bar clamps. I've always used Bessie clamps, but anyway, I use just a crap ton of these bar clamps, and we'll get this cabinet all clamped up. And again, I use minimal pressure on my bar clamps. You don't want to use a ton of pressure. I see a lot of people just, you know, they basically just clamp the shit out of their cabinet and just squeeze out all that glue, and it's just unnecessary. So minimal pressure, just enough to close the joint. You'll see all these squaring blocks I put on this cabinet. I'm a big fan of squaring blocks. I have tons of them because I make them. You make them out of scrap pieces of wood. It's funny how, like, all your drops are sometimes, or not, most of your drops are going to be below 16 inches, which is just about the perfect dimension for a good squaring block. So I'll cut those squaring blocks up, or cut those drops, and make squaring blocks out of them. Make sure the face of the cabinet is square. We'll put a couple more clamps here on the mid panel. And it's important when you're gluing up your cabinet. A lot of people overlook the height of the cabinet. So you want to check the height of the cabinet in multiple places to make sure that you have the exact same dimension running along the height as you do along the ends. So our cabinet is clamped up, it's dry. Now we're gonna get on to the next part of the assembly, which is we have these spacer blocks that we need to put in. I'm gonna go ahead and glue those in, and we'll go ahead and tack them in with a pin nailer or a brad nailer. Now we need to put in these basically 3 holes in the corners. We're gonna put these in at a 45-degree angle. And these are gonna be the holes that are gonna hold the faux bamboo legs on, which are our structural legs. This is a 3/16 drill bit that I'm using. It's a 12-inch long drill bit, and just makes it easy to get in there. 6-inch bit is fine as well. So anyway, we drill these holes in, and this is gonna give us a place for our Craig screws to grow, which are what we're gonna use to hold our leg on. We'll go ahead and block plane the corner here, just so we don't have a sharp corner. That leg can go on there nice and easy. We'll go ahead and follow the same process on the other side, which is, again, just glue it, nail it with the brad nailer. These are probably 3/4 inch brads. And then you want to make sure all your corners are nice and clean, so your wood goes on cleanly. You don't want to have any obstructions with old glue. So anyway, yeah, here, same thing. We drill our holes in at a 45-degree angle, so that we have a place to put our Craig screw to hold our leg on. The leg will of course be glued and screwed when it's all said and done. So here's me showing the bamboo leg. I'm going to trace the top of this thing so I know where to cut it on my miter saw. We'll go ahead and cut these legs on. I order my legs in long because I have various cabinets. So it's advantageous to order those legs long. You can use them for all kinds of different cabinets. So here I'm using a brad point bit, which is, this is actually the same thing. It comes in a Craig kit, and just gets a nice place to put that screw. See, that fits in there. We've got a good 5/16 or 5/8 sticking out. So when we screw our leg in, we're gonna grab the meat of that leg, and it'll suck that leg in nice and tight, which is what we want. We'll go ahead and add glue and a clamp to our piece to hold everything in place. You want to make sure that leg is nice and tight on your cabinet. And we'll use our Craig screws to pull that thing in nice and tight. And again, you don't want any gaps. So when you're sucking this thing down, make sure you don't have any gaps, and don't throw the impact gun into your face. But yeah, make sure you have a nice tight leg. You don't want any gaps, especially because we paint furniture. If you have that gap, it's going to be much more of a problem than if you stain a piece of furniture. People don't understand this, but when you stain cabinets, you could hide so much stuff. The light refraction within a stained piece is so much less than within a glossy painted piece. So people just don't, it's hard for people to fathom how difficult it is to take a cabinet and paint it with a high gloss lacquer. Every gap has to be filled, or at least be very tight, because all those gaps create light spots, which you see, or dark spots, which you see when you have a colored pigment. So anyway, run these screws in. This thing's good to go. Now we're going to go ahead and add all of our hinges, and you've seen this in the other videos that I do. I know it's not a ton of fun to watch, but we're gonna do it anyway, because the way I install hinges, I think, is very quick, and it's beneficial to people. But anyway, I mark all my stuff at 3.5 inches. I pretty much do it for all my cabinets. If you do need to add hinges to the center as well, if you have anything that's over about 32, 36 inches, you want to have a third hinge, but most of our doors are 30 inches and below. So anyway, marking all these, I'm going to hit it with my combination square. I use tons of combination squares. We're just going to give ourselves a nice big line to look at. And again, because I paint things, it doesn't matter if I have pencil lines on there, so I don't even have to clean any of that stuff off, which is nice. So mark all these lines, and then we'll move on to our jig, which is just a basic jig that I've made for installing hinges. It just has an offset of basically 2 3/8 of an inch, and this is for inset bloom Euro hinges. And I use tons of these things, so I have several of these jigs. Anyway, there's I'll use my little centering bit. I'm gonna add a centering bit to all these holes, and then it gives me the exact location for where the hinge plate is, so I can just screw those hinge plates on easily. I don't have to mess with it. I don't have to kind of expect that I'm going to be centered, because the jig is chamfered, it centers exactly where it needs to go. It's a great, easy tool. If you want, I can show you how I make that with just a piece of 032 aluminum. Very easy to make with a vise. Anyway, so same thing, you're going to put all these all these hinge plates on, and we'll put the we'll get all these hinge plates on, and then that'll move us on to cutting out doors, which is what we're going to do next. Here I'm adding these little, they're basically 3/4 by 3/4 by 1/2 inch blocks of wood to the face of our cabinet, and these break up the faux bamboo details. You need something to break up the detail. Here I'm at the panel saw, my POS panel saw. I need to rip up a bunch of material for these doors. You know, our doors are about 26 tall and maybe, I don't know, 16 inches wide. And so we'll cut this out of maple. Maple's a fantastic wood for taking paint. It paints pretty well and is very easy to work with. The material comes in fairly straight. A lot of people don't think of materials. Some materials come in kind of warped and goofy shape. This maple material seems to come in pretty good. So we'll head over to the table saw. We'll get this doors cut up. We're basically taking the rough cuts from the panel saw. We're going to get them closer on our table saw. Then once we get everything whacked up on our table saw, I like to go over to my edge sander, and this is where I square up most of my parts. I don't router them. I get my panel saw sucks, so this is what I do. I square them up here on the edge sander, and I'll mark them with a couple of X's so I know which side's square, and then I'm able to head back to my table saw, and I can rip the other side, and I get a nice square door this way, or any panel for that matter. This is how I do most of my panels, unless I have something really large. Then I'll go ahead and I'll use a router and a straight edge, like I guess most people would do. It'd be nice to have a sliding panel saw, so maybe for Christmas. Now I get over to my doors, and again, this is the simplest way to do it. It's not necessarily the fastest, but I just measure over 3.5, just like I did on the carcass of my cabinet. Measure over that 3.5, and I'll add all these lines with my combination squares, which you're seeing that I'm doing here. And then I'll take all these doors, and I'll carry them over into the other room where I have a drill press set up for just for drilling Euro hinges, and I'll drill these out, and I drill these down about 5/8 of an inch, and it gives me a good clean bore for taking those Euro hinges. So now we'll check all of our hinges. We'll make sure they're nice and square, and we'll go ahead and take our centering bit again, pop in some pilot holes, then we'll take our 5/16 brad point bit that just basically has tape on it, and we'll drill down into our panel. And I'm using inserta hinges, and inserta hinges are fantastic for painted furniture because we have to take our doors on and off quite a bit. We have to take the hardware on quite a bit, off and on quite a bit. We can use that cam, lift the cam up, pull the hinge out, and it's done. And then when we want to reinstall it, we just push the hinge in there, lock the cam back in place, and it's fantastic. So screws are the way to go. I really prefer screws, but from a production standpoint, these cam hinges from Bloom just make our life so much easier. So that's why we use them. Here you see I'm fighting this particular hinge because I just love to struggle. So we'll get a little hammer and block of wood and beat this thing in place and see if it'll fit. Let's get these doors installed on this cabinet. And the idea of this is I just want to get the doors put on and make sure that they close. And if they don't close, I'm going to go do a little bit of massage into them so that they just close. I don't need to gap right now. I'm just wanting to get everything on there. You can see that the doors all go on. No issues. So now I got to put this piece of trim on. I forgot to put this on during my carcass assembly. This is just a piece of beaded trim, which I will show a picture of. And it goes along the face of the cabinet, and it's just a decorative detail. It also adds a little bit of rigidness to the face of the cabinet. Obviously, the face of the cabinet is the weakest part of the cabinet. You get all the weight from the doors, You've got the not a lot of structure there on the face of the cabinet. You know, obviously the back is where you have the most strength. So this piece adds a nice decorative touch. It also adds a little bit of rigidness. Behind this, a lot of manufacturers will actually put a piece of aluminum. So you can put a piece of aluminum back behind there with a couple of screws, and it really helps to aid in the flatness of your cabinet, the straightness of your cabinet. As furniture ages, gravity tends to take a hold no matter how well it's built, and it will cause the cabinet to sag a little bit. So any laminations of any kind that you can add to your cabinet will help to kind of defy gravity for a long period of time. So that's what that trim does. It serves two functions. So to get this thing put in place, I'm going to go ahead and add a couple of spring clamps to this cabinet, or excuse me, to this trim to get it to stay in place. And once it's dry, we'll remove those clamps and move on to the next step in this cabinet. Now let's go to our cabinet. We're going to go ahead and label everything. I always label all my doors, you know, A, B, C, D, and then I of course put an up arrow so that I don't get anything confused. Because I don't do a lot of grain matching, because we paint everything, you know, the doors can go in any weird direction, so it's important to label everything. So I'm making sure that all these doors close. That's all I'm trying to do, is get them to close without hitting the cabinet, without anything. And you can see that I still have my straight edges on the bottom of the cabinet, so the cabinet is nice and flat. So I'll run over the table saw or the edge sander and basically kiss any areas that are touching to get these doors to close by themselves without any issues. And that's all that I'm doing here before I start my gapping process. So here I'm adding a couple pieces of trim to the front of my cabinet. These are, again, this is our faux bamboo detail. This is one of the things that we're known for. Our clients absolutely love this faux bamboo furniture. So we're going to add these. Obviously I use CA glue and pin nails. These are 23 gauge pin nails that are 3/4 of an inch long, and we CA this stuff on. When you paint furniture, the paint, due to the amount of lacquer that goes onto this cabinet, that paint works as almost its own glue as well and bonds this trim to the cabinet. The CA glue, of course, holds it very well as well. Now here I'm going to the actual gapping process. I've got my gapping chip, and I'm basically hitting all the corners and edges of this door so that I know exactly what I need to shave on my doors. Now, a lot of people think that, well, just cut everything square, make everything square, and everything's going to go on perfectly square. Well, that's just not how cabinet making is. Cabinets are never perfectly square. Doors all have to be adjusted. You cannot put one door on one side of the cabinet and put it on another side of the cabinet and expect it to line up. It just won't do it. Here you see my lines for what I'm going to shave my cabinet up to. And this can take, should be pretty easy. Here I'm showing you a quick video of me just adding this little, it's just a little bead detail onto the edge of our cabinet. It helps to just kind of finish off the edge, makes it look really nice. And again, it's just a traditional detail from how the original manufacturers used to make this kind of faux bamboo furniture. You don't want to have any kind of just, you know, dead edge, as I call it. It shouldn't drop off. There should always be something there that catches your interest instead of just having an unfinished looking edge. So that's why we do this. It's a basic detail that just, like I said, adds one more visual interest. Then I'll do a quick little video here of me adding more of this trim on here. This is from a different view, and obviously it's time lapse. But you can see the same thing. I'm just CA gluing all this stuff on. It has to be cut with a jam saw and sanded. And it's a little bit of a tedious process, but it goes pretty quick along the face because the trim's big and there's not a lot of 45s or anything like that to do, so it goes on super fast and it looks really nice. We'll go ahead and do the piece in the center. And you remember those blocks from earlier in the video? Those blocks are there because of basically this piece has nowhere to go, so you have to have a block of wood to make this piece work correctly. I'm going to put my magnets in. Simple process. I've got a jig that I've shown on other videos that I use. It just helps me to locate those magnets where they go, and because we do so many cabinets that are the same, that jig works for a lot of different cabinets. And here we'll flip this cabinet around, and we need to get the back put on because we can't do final gapping until the back is in the cabinet. I see so many people try and gap cabinets when they don't have that back put on, because you don't want to put the back on. It's easy to just do the cabinet without the back, then you have access to it. It works out great, it's easy to work, but then you go and put that gap on and then you're like, shit, your gaps are off because your cabinet isn't as square as you thought it was, because you're human, and although everyone on YouTube makes perfectly square cabinets, it's just no one makes perfectly square cabinets. So the back goes on, it's gonna alter the face of your cabinet. It's just, you can't get around it. So put the back in first. Take the time, make sure that back goes in nice. And again, we use screws because we have to be able to take our backs off for painting purposes. I'm gonna go ahead and turn this cabinet around, and we are going to add the top. Put the top on here, we'll glue it and screw it, and we're going to run Craig screws in from the bottom to make sure that gap, or that top is on there forever. And the thing about having a top on, you want to put that top on very securely, because over the years, people pick up your cabinet by the top. People will wrench the cabinet around, they'll push it by the top, because the top is the furthest thing sticking out, right? It hangs over the most. And so it becomes the first point of contact for people on a cabinet. So now I'm starting to take these doors off. I've used my gapping chip and I've started to create all the gaps. So I'm going over to my edge sander and my table saw right now, and I'm cutting the doors close on the table saw, and then I'm running over my edge sander and I'm kissing them up to my pencil lines from my gapping chip. And this is the way I gap cabinets. I've gapped cabinets forever this way. It works really well, and sometimes, you know, sometimes you gotta take a door off twice, sometimes 3 times to get that thing exactly the way that you want it. So be patient with gapping. Gapping is probably the most difficult thing to do for cabinet makers, because it's a very tedious thing to do, and a lot of people just get frustrated with the perfection that's required to get a nicely gapped cabinet. So be patient. In the end, it will look beautiful when you're done, and that's the important thing, is to not have your cabinet gaps be off, because you don't want your customer to notice it. Anything that's going to draw your customer from your customer's gaze is something that you don't want to have. So having gaps that are uneven, customers don't like that. Keep your gaps even, take your time. Edge banding this door, I'm just going to show you one. Like, you basically just put this edge banding on with an iron. You know, this iron I probably stole from my wife. And of course, we're going to clip the edge banding. We roll it with a block, press it with a block, and we're going to file all the edges. I use a metal file. You can use laminate files, you can use laminate trimmers, you can use all kinds of stuff, but I just use a laminate file, or metal file, shave all that stuff off there, put my hinges back on, yanking these doors off, and I'm adding the decorative profile that I need to add onto all my doors using a combination square. And for me, that profile is it's basically about 1.5 inches, and then you have another square detail at every corner that's about 3 inches. Here I'm doing a time lapse of all this trim work. Okay, this is all this faux bamboo that I'm sticking on this door, all the mapping, sanding, everything. It can be kind of a tedious process, but it makes for a beautiful piece of furniture. And this is what your customers want to see. They want to see that detail, and the fact that we take the time to put that trim on by hand is part of a selling point. You know, if we just had this door basically made on a CNC router or use an embossed trim that we bought from, you know, some vendor, it might not be as valuable. So people really appreciate something that is made from scratch and something that is made by hand by an actual person. So that's a big selling point for our company. Here I'm starting to add these little corner details. I used to make these individually. Now I actually have a mold for them. I'm able to make them as one piece and just basically sand a 45 on the end, so it goes significantly faster. But it still is a very time-consuming process. Everything has to be sanded correctly, everything has to fit correctly, and then be CA glued in place. So you can see it's a tedious process, but again, be patient. Customers appreciate quality, people appreciate quality, and they'll see it in your trim details when you do it. I use adjustable feet on all my credenzas because floors are not flat, right? Cabinets are, floors are not, so all these feet have to be able to be adjusted so that your cabinet sets nice and flat. Again, you took all the time to gap your cabinet. If you have feet that can't be adjusted, then you're basically putting a bunch of shims under your feet, and that doesn't look as professional. If you're going to get people to pay $4, $5, $6, $7,000 for your cabinets, you want them to not have shims under them. So we put these adjustable feet under here. You can see me putting this insert in there, and then I'll twist that foot in there. Now I can raise or lower every foot depending on what the floor looks like. Lastly here, we'll go to putting our shelf pin holes in. Of course, everyone hates this because it's just a time-consuming job that sucks. But I do it the traditional way. I just make a jig, put a little tape on a bit, and I pop all those holes in. And like I'm always saying to people, like, don't put a bunch of shelf pin holes in your cabinet. It looks cheap. You know, put 5, 6, 7 of them in there at most, and then leave it alone. Like, nobody needs that much adjustment in the cabinet. And if it's a taller cabinet, obviously that's going to be a little bit different. But this is my Faux Bamboo Credenza. This is made this one out of maple, and it's a good simple cabinet for people to make. It's a high margin cabinet. You can make these things and sell them for 200-300 times, 200-300% of what it takes to actually produce it, which is a great margin for a cabinet maker. So anyway, this is a Faux Bamboo Credenza. It has, like I said, it's made of maple. It has faux bamboo accents, and this is traditional faux bamboo from the 70s, scaled up and made into cabinets that weren't produced back then, right? These cabinets are made for modern homes, big homes, and like I said, these could be scaled up. You can charge more money for them, and people love them. Designers love this kind of stuff, and yeah, it's great for southern homes, you know, in the South. It's great for New York apartments. It's great for, pretty much anyone that wants to have a nice, beautiful, modern piece of furniture that looks vintage, right? And because we high gloss lacquer most of what we produce, it also becomes a statement piece, right? So this isn't just some piece of furniture in your home. Because it's bright color, it's bright yellow, it's bright orange, it's bright green, blue, whatever. People walk in and go, whoa! So it's super important to, if you want to make money as a furniture maker and as a cabinet maker, you have to sell things that people lust after. Like, it's not enough to want something. People have to lust after your product. And lust is worth more money than want. You know, so anyway, so if you're gonna make something and you think a person's going to want it or a person would value it, I challenge you to think bigger. You know, think about what people pay for a Lamborghini or a Ferrari, you know, or diamond rings. Like, these aren't things that people need. These aren't utilitarian things. These aren't things that, you know, finish something off. Like, these are things that people lust after for years, right? And if you can create a brand or a product that people lust after, like, you're gonna make big bucks. And it's very hard to do, but these kind of products, which are basically meant to emulate things that came from the 70s in modern sizes and in modern, have modern details like soft close slides, soft close drawers, soft close undermount slides, things of that nature. People love that stuff. And so anyway, so this is one of the cabinets that we build. Again, it's high margin, it's fairly easy to build, and it's a beautiful piece. It has, of course, all your soft close doors and drawers, has beautiful faux bamboo accents all over it, and people just lust after this stuff. They absolutely lust after it. And yeah, I'm gonna show you how I make this thing. I'm gonna show you how you can make this thing. And yeah, be thinking about that. You know, not everything is something you want to make for yourself. You know, a lot of times there are people that want to make money doing this craft. And if you can hone your skills and work on creating timeless and beautiful pieces of furniture that people will lust after, you can do this.